narrow gorge between mountains that seem unscalable from above. Here it is, the Neon River. And here's the bridge you are building, says the first pilot. Viktor Roskov speaking to two passengers of his helicopter, Noy Indavong and Vladimir Zhuravlev. In a few hours, we will be saying it's a bridge that has been built. Later, there was a big meeting. The crowd shouted hooray to the Laotian and Soviet bridge builders who contributed in their special way to the third anniversary of the People's Democratic Republic of Laos, having finished months ahead of time the work on the bridge. Traffic has now opened on the highway bridge in Hua Phan province. A bridge of friendship. This is how it was referred to in Laos since the work began. The bridge stands on the legendary Highway 6. During the war, cargoes went along it to the liberated areas. When there were heavy tropical rains, the Neon River rose and the communication between its banks stopped. The first group of construction workers arrived at the project in March 1977. It was led by Noy Indavong, a Laotian specialist who is a graduate from the Moscow Institute of the Motor Industry and Highway Construction, and by a man with whom he studied together in college, Soviet engineer Vladimir Zhuravlev. The workers began the job on October the 31st to build the first pylon. 200 Laotians and 30 Soviet citizens worked there just as one large international family. What they have done can be truly called an exploit. The conditions were difficult indeed. It was difficult to breathe in that narrow gorge, even for people used to tropics. And they worked far away from populated centers. The nearest towns were tens of kilometers away. This first major project of Soviet-Laotian friendship is now finished. A memorial plaque has been set up where anyone can see it, and the inscription reads as follows. This highway bridge was built in 1977 and 1978 in the People's Democratic Republic of Laos with technical assistance from the Soviet Union. This bridge in Hua Phan province has not simply linked the two banks of the river. It has brought together two countries, the Soviet Union and Laos, whose people today mark a national holiday. The holiday of a fraternal nation is also observed in the Soviet Union.
A correspondent of the newspaper Pravda reporting from Laos. In Ottawa, Canada, the prime ministers of the provincial governments have just finished discussing how to improve the country's economic situation. The conference was called by the federal authorities. Correspondent Vladimir Ositrov gives us details.
Local observers feel it will not be simple to improve Canada's economic condition. The economy is in the hands of private companies and largely controlled by corporations of the United States. So the discussions at the conference centered on secondary matters to a large extent, and no specific decisions were reached. Canada has been having economic troubles for a number of years. Industry still works at only 85% of capacity, and unemployment has reached a record high. As prices continue to climb, real wages fall, and nothing the government has done so far has made the situation better. According to the research center Conference Board in Canada, the economic growth rate will continue to decline next year, and unemployment will set another record, climbing above 9% of the workforce. The Conference Board in Canada bases these conclusions on the fact that the forecast for next year for the United States economy is poor, and the Canadian economy depends on the United States economy.
Correspondent Vladimir Ositrov reporting from Ottawa, Canada. At last we go to Afghanistan, where the government is introducing a variety of democratic reforms. It has pledged to industrialize the nation, put through a fully democratic land reform, abolish feudal and pre-feudal relations, give women equality, and ensure the basic rights and freedoms for all the working people. More about this from our correspondent in Kabul.
The Revolutionary Council has issued another decree on land. Leaders of the young republic believe that a full-scale land reform will make it possible for Afghanistan to build a society in which there will be no more exploitation of people, everyone will derive his income from work. A decree issued last summer cancelled all the debts of poor peasants to moneylenders and landed proprietors, and this greatly improved the condition of nearly 11 million peasants that account for 80% of the rural population. The cooperative movement is gaining more and more ground, and committees to protect the revolution had been set up in the villages. The government is also taking steps to make the new government machinery and the banks and financial bodies work more efficiently. The Planning Ministry has started drawing up Afghanistan's first 5-year plan for national development. The first trade unions have appeared among industrial and office workers. To raise living standards, the government has frozen prices of some foods. Government agencies are monitoring the freeze. A system of fair distribution of food has been introduced, with industrial and office workers getting special privileges. The new government has also announced there will be no more discrimination for reasons of race, language, or ethnic affiliation. All citizens, including all members of the national minorities, have equal rights. The radio and television services now broadcast in some programs on various local languages. Dailies and periodicals are also published in these languages. Work to abolish illiteracy continues, and the scale of this work is steadily growing. The new government's foreign policy, judging from its program statement, is geared to such principles as non-alignment, positive and active neutrality, peaceful coexistence, and neighborly relations with all countries in that part of the world. In various official statements, Afghanistan has pledged to oppose the imperialist policy of aggression, oppression, colonialism, and racism, and to work for peace and the freedom and social and economic progress of all nations. The Soviet Union has always been friendly towards its southern neighbor. It was the first country to recognize the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan, and at the time said it was confident there would continue to be all-round fruitful cooperation between the two. Prime Minister Nur Mohammad Taraki is expected to visit the Soviet Union shortly. Both countries feel the visit will offer new opportunities for cooperation on a parity basis and to mutual advantage.
That correspondence dispatched from Kabul, Afghanistan, we bring to a close Moscow Newsreel. You are tuned to Radio Moscow World Service.
Let me remind you that Radio Moscow World Service is broadcasting in the 13, 16, 19, 25, 31 and 41 meter bands, and are the main points of the news. The Soviet National Daily Pravda has put the blame on the aggressive circles of the West for undermining relaxation of tensions and continuing the arms race. The General Assembly's First Committee has approved the Soviet proposal on signing an international convention to strengthen the guarantees of the security of the non-nuclear countries. In Tehran and other Iranian cities, a general strike is going on. There has been a demonstration in Windhoek, the main city of Namibia, against the fictitious elections aimed at setting up a puppet regime in the country. The former United States Attorney General has admitted that there are violations of human rights in the country. In West Germany, the lockout of 70,000 steel workers by the employers could lead to a national steel strike. This has been said by Franz Steinkuehler, one of the leaders of the Steel and Engineering Workers Union. Starting with January, there will be new pay rises for the men and women employed in the fields other than industry and agriculture. A ballet company from Leningrad has arrived in France for a month's concert tour. Figure skaters from 14 countries have applied to take part in the traditional international competitions in Moscow for the prizes of the newspaper Moscow News. The competitions are to be held from the 7th to the 10th of this month. And that ends the news in brief. And next, we bring you music from Moldavia, a small republic in the southwest of the Soviet Union, famous for its melodious songs, fiery dances, and skillful musicians. The dance Moldavanska is often called a sort of visiting card of the republic and the queen of Moldavian dances. The queen of Moldavian dances, Moldavanska. And what tempo! Audiences in many countries have admired the performances of Moldavian dance groups Jock and Fluerash and the Doina Choir. The youngest folk group is called Folklore. It was set up several years ago by the Moldavian radio and is very popular. Here it is with a traditional dance tune from one of the regions of Moldavia, Yedinet. a traditional dance from Yiddish, which does keep you going. The folklore orchestra is similar to other groups of this kind, with violins, clarinets, accordions, pipes and bagpipes. There are also several specific Moldavian instruments, such as a harmonica and cymbals that shape the beat of Moldavian melody. Cymbals are often the solo instrument. Vasily Krichum plays on the cymbals a merry dance tune called Hora. He's accompanied by the folklore orchestra. The fiery dance tune was Hora, and you just tried to keep it up. And yes, singers consider it an honor to perform with the folklore orchestra. Here's a popular singer, Nikolai Sulak, with the Moldavian song, Let's Dance, Old Man. Let's Dance, Old Man, quite suitable for old granddads. Another group of musicians you're going to hear today is the Mugorel Orchestra, organized by the Philharmonic Society of Chisinau, Moldavia's capital, sometime before the folklore group. The orchestra tours extensively and everywhere the public warmly receives its leading singer, Marie Dragan. And here she is with a song called Letty.
Ar muri dar nu sunt dură, la 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 la. Mai veni la voastră gură, la 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 la. Ar muri dar nu sunt dură, la 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 la. Mai veni la voastră gură, ochi de oasă. La presmă la fără cău, măi, coplele, hop! Și de-o coplă împărau, măi, coplele, hop! Și roagă lui Dumnezeu, măi, la 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 la. Ca să iei umplă cău, măi, la 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 la. Și roagă lui Dumnezeu, măi, la 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 la. Ca să iei umplă cău, măi, uite să asta.
A Moldavian folk song about a Letty. Another soloist of the Mugure Orchestra, Anastasia Istrati, sings I'm Going to the Dance Tonight. Anastasia Istrati with another song called Just Like This.
Just Și la părință să ne ceară tot frumos. I-a spus mămica să ne pare sănătos. Deci n-am vrut să apriți ca hoare și ne-i care cine se aprinde în jos. Astăzi ca o zi, și poate și poartă nenem în noroc. Ram tiriram 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 tiriram. Când am ieșit cu el afară, ia-ți așa, să-i dau furiță de picioare, el mi-a spus că să plecăm în lumea mare și m-am dus, că mi-este drag și-mi place tare cine-i indicat, că ce cine se opri de jos. Astăzi ca o zi, de voi și poartă nenim în noroc. Ram tiriram 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 vorbește tată cu spurată, ia-ți așa, și ia-ți așa cu pură frate, nu-i rău, când că iubirea pe furate cum plăcă, să fii mai dulce decât toate, cine-i indicat, că cine se apri de jos. Astăzi ca o zi, de și foarte nenim în noroc. Ram tiriram 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 tiriram
And now, recordings of the popular dance company Joke. A joke means a dance, and also the place where you dance, and in general, merrymaking. And old David would say, let's go to the joke, and the whole village would turn out to sing, dance, and have fun. You've been listening to folk tunes from Moldavia. Well, I think Moldavian folk music is just the right kind of music to put you in a good mood for the rest of the day. If you can still be with us, I'd like to remind you that you're tuned to Radio Moscow World Service, broadcasting in the 13, 16, 19, 25, 31 and 41 meter bands. After the Kremlin chime, there's news, our weekly feature, Soviet Panorama. On the half hour, news in brief, followed by a mailbag. And then we have another program of music that takes us up to the hour. Radio Moscow World Service. It's 11 hours Moscow time, that's 08 hours Greenwich Mean Time. For the next 7 hours, we shall be on the air in the 13, 16, 19, 25, 31 and 41 meter bands. News from Moscow, read by Zina Levashova. First, the headlines. The Soviet National Daily Pravda has put the blame on the aggressive circles of the West for undermining relaxation of tensions and continuing the arms race. The General Assembly's First Committee has approved the Soviet proposal on signing an international convention to strengthen guarantees of the security of the non-nuclear countries. In Tehran and other Iranian cities, a general strike is going on. There's been a demonstration in Windhoek, the main city of Namibia, against the fictitious elections aimed at setting up a puppet regime in the country. The former United States Attorney General has admitted that there are violations of human rights in the country. Those are the headlines, and now here's the news in full. The Soviet National Daily Pravda has put the blame for undermining the relaxation of tensions and for the continued arms race squarely on aggressive circles in the West. In its weekly roundup of world affairs, the paper says these circles count on wresting unilateral concessions from the Soviet Union and other socialist countries, concessions detrimental to their security. In this way, these circles hope to achieve a military superiority of the West over the socialist countries. In these conditions, continues the Soviet Communist Party newspaper, it's necessary to maintain and enhance the defense potential of the Warsaw Treaty. At their conference in Moscow 10 days ago, the members of that organization of socialist countries reaffirmed their commitment to relaxation and called on all states to make a resolute turn towards halting the arms race. The Moscow conference participants, for one thing, called on the 5 main nuclear powers to start negotiations on banning nuclear weapons and reducing military budgets. The Soviet Parliament this week approved the country's budget for next year, in which defense expenditures have remained at the same level as last year. At the United Nations General Assembly, the First or Political Committee has given its backing to the Soviet proposal for an international convention that will strengthen guarantees of security for non-nuclear states. The resolution welcomes the determination of many countries to keep their territories free of nuclear weapons. The sponsors of the resolution are 19 socialist and non-aligned countries. Thousands of people attended a big meeting in Vientiane yesterday to mark the 3rd anniversary of the Laotian People's Democratic Republic. Present at the meeting were party and government leaders. Speakers pointed out that in these 3 years, the country has made substantial social and economic progress. Gratitude was expressed to the Soviet Union, Vietnam, and other fraternal countries for help and support in defending the revolution and building socialism. A general strike is taking place in Tehran and other Iranian cities in response to a call from the opposition. Life in the capital has been practically paralyzed. Armored cars and tanks are patrolling the streets. Big demonstrations against the government began in Tehran on Friday and continued yesterday. The troops resorted to firearms to disperse the demonstrators. News agency dispatches put the number of dead at more than 1,000. The head of the military government, Al-Khari, has given a warning the authorities will take the toughest measures to suppress anti-government protests. The opposition in Iran is demanding that martial law be lifted, that political prisoners be freed, and that long overdue social and economic reforms be carried out. There's been a meeting in Washington between President Carter and the State Secretary Vance and the Egyptian Prime Minister Halil. Mr. Vance said at the end of the meeting that the Egyptian-Israeli contacts within the Camp David Accord will be resumed. Observers believe Washington has succeeded in getting from Egypt new concessions in favor of Israel. One of the leaders of the Zimbabwe Patriotic Front, Joshua Nkomo, has described the Anglo-American proposal for a roundtable conference on Rhodesia as a non-starter. Joshua Nkomo made the statement after a meeting in Lusaka with the British and American emissaries Cladwin Hughes and Stephen Lowe. Before the meeting, Joshua Nkomo said he would not sit down at the negotiating table with Ian Smith, who is slaughtering innocent people to retain power. In Windhoek, the main city of South African-occupied Namibia, there's been a demonstration in protest against the fictitious elections to be staged next week with the purpose of setting up a puppet administration. The elections are to be supervised by South African troops. Under a United Nations decision, the voting was to have taken place next year and under the supervision of that international organization. At the insistence of the African countries, the Security Council is meeting next week to discuss the situation in Namibia. The former Attorney General of the United States, Ramsey Clark, has called on the administration to ensure guarantees of human rights in the country, regardless of the origin and social standing of citizens. Speaking in Washington, he pointed to the sharp contrast between the rich and the poor in the United States and the misusage which takes place in the system of administering justice. Clark spoke out against using the question of human rights as an instrument for reviving the Cold War. In West Germany, the lockout of 70,000 steel workers by the employers could lead to a national steel strike. This has been said by Franz Steinkuehler, one of the leaders of the Steel and Engineering Workers Union. Up to now, only part of the steel workers, 37,000 of them at the Ruhr plant, have been involved in the strike. They quit work earlier this week in support of claims that have been backed by all the workers in the industry. But the employers turned down their claims and announced a lockout not only of the strikers, but of 29,000 more workers at other plants. This news bulletin is coming to you in the World Service of Radio Moscow. Starting with January, there'll be new pay rises for the men and women employed in the fields other than industry and agriculture. During the year, wages and salaries will be increased from 20 to 35% for 18 million people working in the health service, education, cultural fields, in trade and public services. Taxes on them will also either be abolished altogether or reduced. Since 1976, wages have been raised for 13 million people. At the same time, prices of consumer goods have remained the same. A ballet company from Leningrad has arrived in France for a month's concert tour. The program includes a danse Giselle and Maurice Jarreau's Notre Dame. Jarreau's ballet was staged in Leningrad a year ago by the French choreographer Roland Petit. The dancers will also show excerpts from ballets by Russian and foreign classics, including excerpts from Tchaikovsky's ballet The Swan Lake. Figure skaters from 14 countries have applied to take part in the traditional international competitions in Moscow for the prizes of the newspaper Moscow News. The competitions are to be held from the 7th to the 10th of this month. A Soviet women's tennis team is doing well in the contest for the International Tennis Federation's Cup in Melbourne. The competition is the equivalent of a world championship for women's teams. In the semi-finals, the Soviet girls were up against the Australians, the favorites in this tournament. But after the two singles matches, the score is 1-1. The crucial third match in the doubles was put off. And now to end the news, here are the headlines once again. The Soviet national daily Pravda has put the blame on the aggressive circles of the West for undermining relaxation of tensions and continuing the arms race. The General Assembly's First Committee has approved the Soviet proposal on signing an international convention to strengthen guarantees of the security of the non-nuclear countries. In Tehran and other Iranian cities, a general strike is going on. There's been a demonstration in Windhoek, the main city of Namibia, against the fictitious elections aimed at setting up a puppet regime in the country. The former United States Attorney General has admitted that there are violations of human rights in the country. And those headlines, we end the news from Moscow.
Next from Radio Moscow World Service comes Soviet Panorama. In this edition, we'll tell you about the closing session of the Soviet Parliament. Then you'll hear an account of a press conference organized by the State Committee in charge of machinery supplies to the farms. It will be followed by an item on how Soviet doctors try to prevent epidemics of influenza. And finally, Eleanor Yankovskaya of our staff will present the story of Masha.
The Soviet Parliament completed its session in Moscow. Our observer Valery Sergeyev, who attended the session, has this story. The session opened with debates on the drafts of the Economic and Social Development Plan and the national budget for next year. Prior to the session, both these documents have been examined by the standing parliamentary committees over a month. During the two-day debates, the MPs introduced a number of amendments and suggestions to the drafts. Both the Economic and Social Development Plan and the budget were finally approved on November the 30th at the separate meetings of the two chambers of Parliament, the Council of the Union and the Council of Nationalities. That means that both have been made into laws to be implemented by all agencies and persons concerned during the next year. The Social and Economic Development Plan is aimed at promoting further economic growth of the country and at raising further the people's living standards. And the national budget provides the necessary allocations for all these measures and projects. At the session, Parliament discussed the draft of the law on Soviet citizenship. The draft, which contains 29 articles, had been prepared by the respective committees of both houses with the participation of experts, public organizations, and scientists. The law on Soviet citizenship is based on the provisions of the new Soviet Constitution. It covers the problem in a more thorough way than the previous law that has been in force over the past 40 years. The new law of Soviet citizenship takes into account many of the existing legal provisions on this subject, the already established precedents, and the currently accepted international norms in this respect. Common Soviet citizenship for all is being established in line with the constitution of the multinational Soviet state. That means in practice that the citizen of every Soviet constituent republic is automatically a Soviet citizen. All citizens have fully equal rights, irrespective of the circumstances of acquiring their Soviet citizenship. In the debate on this provision of the draft, members of Parliament pointed out that it differs from such laws in the capitalist countries. Their citizenship laws often place restrictions on the rights of a person depending on where and under what circumstances he received his citizenship. A number of provisions of the new law cover marriage and family relations. The law says, for example, that if a woman who has Soviet citizenship marries a foreigner, she retains her Soviet citizenship. The new law does not recognize dual citizenship. It proclaims that the children of persons who permanently reside in the Soviet Union and who have no other citizenship will be recognized as Soviet citizens. The draft also describes the rules of acquiring Soviet citizenship. This matter is being decided irrespective of a person's race, nationality, language, sex, or place of residence. It is the Presidium of Soviet Parliament alone which can decide all cases of termination of Soviet citizenship. Persons can be stripped of their Soviet citizenship in exceptional cases if they commit actions which discredit their citizenship of this country. Members of Parliament stressed in their speeches that the articles concerning the termination of Soviet citizenship and cases of persons who are stripped of it are fully in line with international agreements signed by the Soviet Union, including the International Covenant on Civic and Political Rights. The law was passed unanimously by a joint session of both houses. With that, Parliament ended its session.
In Moscow the other day, the chairman of the State Committee in charge of machinery supplies to the farms, Alexander Izhevsky, gave a press conference. He outlined some of the problems connected with the supplies of machinery and equipment to the collective and state farms. Alexander Izhevsky said a total of more than 2.5 million tractors and other machines are now being used by the farms. Much of the farm work is performed by electrical appliances and mechanisms. Over the past 13 years, the amount of energy available to the farms has more than doubled. The correspondents asked Alexander Izhevsky about the prices of farm machines in the Soviet Union. Alexander Izhevsky.
То есть совхозы получают самые дешевые в мире минеральные удобрения и технику.
Alexander Izhevsky said that farm machines and also fertilizers are sold to Soviet farms at the world's lowest prices. The cooperative farmers, for instance, can purchase the powerful Kirovets tractor at the price which is only slightly above its production cost. In the advanced Western countries, farmers have to pay 3 to 6 times more for such machines. Alexander Izhevsky stressed that the Soviet government does not try to make the farmers compensate in any way for the low cost of farm machines. The price of tractors and other agricultural machines of one and the same class remains unchanged over many years. Alexander Izhevsky recalled that as of New Year, the government will pay higher purchase prices to the farms for their milk, wool, mutton, and some vegetables. Thanks to this measure, the cooperative farms will net more than 3 billion rubles of extra profits, and retail food prices will remain stable. Alexander Izhevsky also spoke about cooperation between the socialist countries in this field. He stressed that the Soviet Union manufactures powerful tractors and harvesting combines for all members of the socialist community. Many farm machines are supplied to the Soviet Union by different socialist states. Bulgaria, for instance, supplies sowers and sunflower harvesters. The German Democratic Republic supplies self-propelled hay cutters and fodder harvesters. Czechoslovakia helps by supplying sugar beet harvesters, and Hungary with seed processing machines.
Those were some of the main points discussed at the Moscow press conference by the chairman of the committee in charge of machinery supplies to the Soviet farms. Next in our program, we shall explain to you what the Soviet Union does to prevent epidemics of the flu. Here are some facts. A number of research centers across the nation focus on the flu, with the largest 2 located in Moscow and in Leningrad. Aside from these centers, there are monitoring posts in various cities that register cases of the flu 60 posts in all in the Soviet Union. What makes it difficult to battle with this disease is that the virus does not remain the same from epidemic to epidemic. Hence, vaccine developed during one epidemic is not foolproof in the next. Experience has shown, however, that anti-flu vaccines and chemical drugs of various kinds do reduce the incidence of the disease during epidemics. Last year, the Leningrad Institute, specializing in influenza, developed a vaccine that reportedly slashes the incidence by 7 to 8 times. Difficult as it is to battle with influenza, the Soviet health service is able to cope with epidemics because it is a government-financed service free of charge to all. There are outpatient clinics and first aid centers in every corner of the country. And industrial enterprises, offices, schools and colleges all have their medical staffs to carry out preventative measures. The staffs are most active during the cold and damp months of autumn. There's they who begin vaccinating employees and students. Last winter, the monitoring post in the city of Khabarovsk in the Far East was the first to spot the burgeoning of a flu epidemic. When the proper data were fed into a computer, the computer came up with the forecast that in Moscow, the epidemic would reach its peak between the 20th and 27th of December, and 50,000 persons would apply for medical assistance. The forecast proved correct. The forecasts for 99 other cities across the nation also proved correct. When the Lithuanian capital Vilnius received the forecast, it extended the winter school holidays by 10 days and effectively slowed down the spread of the disease. During epidemics, all outpatient clinics in cities and rural towns rearrange their work to meet the needs of the moment. Patients with any symptoms of a cold are assigned to special entries and exits in special doctor's offices. Clinic staffs are expanded with medical school students. Hospitals enlarge their departments for flu patients. The greater number of patients, however, receive treatment right at home. The Soviet Union's free medical service includes doctor's visits to the home. During the epidemic last year, 99% of the patients were treated at home. To forestall pneumonia, the most common complication after the flu, all convalescing patients are required to have their lungs fluoroscoped. Those were the measures the Soviet Union takes to curb epidemics of the flu and forestall serious complications.
Hello, this is Elena Yankovskaya with the story of Masha. Masha has her eyes glued to the stage. Bandits are chasing the doctor and the girl and boy through the jungles of Africa. You can hear the chase in the music. Masha is watching a ballet especially written for children. The story is about a veterinary who goes to Africa to treat a sick monkey, and with the girl and boy who accompany him, experiences all sorts of adventures. The doctor's name is Ivan Lee.